The only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse. Now, this idea that means that for some reason, suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these two cells who had half the DNA. But suddenly there's a
correct. Yes, something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
Well, hold on.
Charlie.
Time out. Hold on.
What you just witnessed was the moment a professional pundit, someone who had spent years rolling up to college campuses to own the libs, crash. Hard. Really hard. Completely abandoning his scientific justification for banning abortion, Charlie Kirk actually called conception magic. As in, actual magic.
Something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
This is a man who built his career on sounding confident and bulldozing opponents, as if he had a PhD in every subject. Yet here he was, fumbling over basic biology, while a kind Cambridge medical student calmly explained the science that any first-year student would know.
You say magical as in, oh, it's beautiful, it's an incredible thing that happens, of course. But it's not incredible in the sense we don't know what's going on. There's no new DNA coming out of nowhere.
And so, what we're going to dissect in this video is how Charlie Kirk's favourite talking points, clumps of cells, miracles of life, unique markers, all collapsed under scrutiny, and how Kai Bevan's patient, precise reasoning left Charlie scrambling for mysticism, appeals to patriotism, and eventually, magic. Truly, it is a lesson in how to and how not to debate. Before we do that, though, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. Charlie Kirk was recently, tragically, murdered. It's no secret that I found much of what he had to say abhorrent, and I had looked forward to the opportunity to confront him in the debate sphere. But, of course, that's now never gonna happen. Understandably, some of you may feel that it's tactless to keep analysing this debate, and I entirely appreciate that. But upon much thought, and after revisiting his corpus of works, I believe it's vital to do so. You see, Charlie built his brand on never waiting for the dust to settle. He was a champion of speaking one's mind immediately, openly, no matter the circumstances. When school shootings occurred, he was on air pronouncing dead children a price worth paying for gun rights.
I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
When any cultural flashpoint emerged, Charlie's response was instant and unfiltered. To suddenly handle him with kid gloves would, frankly, be a disrespect to the very philosophy he lived by. And now, in the wake of his own death, we're seeing attempts to whitewash his record, painting him out as a great man and debater while ignoring the substance of his words and the rhetoric that fueled extremism like January 6th. This channel is about examining arguments, and that is what I'm gonna keep doing. Because the most honourable way to treat Charlie's legacy is not by sanitizing it, but by remembering exactly what he said in full and without pity. So, let's get to it.
Our next question is from Kai Bevan at Trinity Hall.
All right, so thank you for coming, Charlie. My question to you, I'm a medical student, and so I'm going to throw out the big A word. I know you get asked about it a lot, but I want to hear from you what your opinion is on abortion.
Now that is a friendly and sharp opening. By casually dropping, I'm a medical student, Kai just set a trap in a very specific way.
I'm a medical student.
If Charlie tries to lean on science, his weakest subject, then he's arguing with someone who actually studies human biology. If he leans on faith, he looks like he's waving a Bible at a biology textbook. It's a lose-lose situation for Charlie. And notice the velvet wrapping around the blade. Thank you for coming. I know you get asked about this a lot. Kai isn't aggressive, he's polite, almost differential.
Thank you for coming, Charlie. I know you get asked about it a lot.
That is probably intentional. If Charlie blows up later, and spoiler, he will, then he's going to look like the guy who brought a sledgehammer to a tea party. We can put it this way. The first few words in an exchange are vital. They set the standard. And Kai is going with the friendly gambit.
But I want to hear from you what your opinion is on abortion.
Life begins at conception.
Here's Charlie's opening gambit, and it is a lot more clever than it first appears. Life begins at conception is true in a purely biological sense. A metabolically active organism begins at fertilization. This is biological consensus. But notice the trick. Charlie's using this unconventional biological fact to smuggle in a highly controversial moral claim. He's conflating biological life, cells metabolizing and dividing, with moral personhood, consciousness, rights, legal protection. It's a buried equivocation fallacy in action, when someone uses a word in two different ways within the same argument to mislead. He's using life in two completely different senses and pretending that they're the same thing.
Life begins at conception.
To make it clearer, consider this. Nobody's actually debating whether a zygote is biologically alive. Of course it is. So are bacteria, cancer cells, and the living cells that you shed every day. The real question that Kai asked was about abortion, about moral status, about rights, about when we grant legal protections.
Your opinion is on abortion.
Charlie dodges that entirely by answering a different, easier question and hoping that nobody notices the switch. It's like being asked, why should we ban gay marriage? And responding, marriage is between two people. It's true. It's deliberately evasive, and it completely misses the actual moral question at stake. This sleight of hand, pretending the biological question is the moral question, will be Charlie's core move throughout the debate. And you know, this refusal to actually answer any questions will be coming up again and again and again. In fact, we're gonna keep a counter.
Life begins at conception.
But about abortion specifically, why do you think abortion's wrong specifically?
Beautiful. That was a super quick and vital demand for clarification. Kai's not letting Charlie hide behind slogans. You see, Charlie wants to stay in the abstract because it's rhetorically powerful to do so. If he just says that life begins at conception, the audience can fill in the rest with their own moral intuitions, and it feels like an argument without him having to actually give one. But by repeating specifically, Kai is yanking him out of the fog and dragging him back to the actual question. He's effectively saying, nice try with the philosophical smokescreen, buddy, but we're talking about real-world policy here. Spell it out. Make the case. And that forces Charlie to actually lay his cards on the table.
Why do you think abortion's wrong specifically?
Well, you agree murder is wrong?
And there it is again. Another Kirk classic dodge. Instead of answering directly, Charlie flips the script to ask a question of his own.
You agree murder is wrong?
But look at his bigger move. He's setting up dominoes. If Kai agrees that murder is wrong, which of course he does, definitionally it's wrongful killing, then Charlie can push him down the path to, therefore, abortion is murder. It's a tautology, dressed up as an argument. It's like saying, do you agree that all bachelors are unmarried men? Well, yes. That's just the definition. It doesn't prove anything beyond itself. And here, Charlie's doing the same trick. He's smuggling in his conclusion by hiding it in the premise. Without spotting the move, it's like being invited to step on a welcome mat, only to realize that it's a bear trap.
You agree murder is wrong?
I agree. Okay, so this is where we get to the question, right? Because what is it about murder you say is wrong? Like, why is murder wrong?
Well, because it's a human being, not just because it has consciousness or because it's of a certain age, because it's a human.
Kai spots the trap and just steps over it. Instead of letting Charlie shove him into the murder equals abortion pipeline, Kai reframes it as a philosophical question. Why is murder wrong?
Why is murder wrong?
If Charlie were to actually answer, it would force him to spell out principles that could be examined and tested for consistency. But look at Charlie's response.
Not just because it has consciousness.
Nobody mentioned consciousness. Charlie is preemptively swatting a point that Kai never raised. Do you know what this tells us? He clearly knows that consciousness is the Achilles heel in his position. It's like walking into a room and immediately announcing, by the way, I definitely didn't eat the last cookie. Nobody accused you, my dude, but thanks for pointing out the crumbs on your chest. This is also where Charlie falls into circular reasoning, when the conclusion is hidden in the premise. A logical Ouroboros eating its own tail. Think of it this way. Sleeping pills work because they have a dormitive property. Well, that's great, isn't it? It sounds profound, even. That is, until you realise that dormitive is just Latin for makes you sleepy. So it's really just sleeping pills work because they make you sleepy. Charlie's doing the same thing. Murder is wrong because it's the wrongful killing of a human. Now, let's quietly assume it's always wrong to kill a human being. From there, abortion counts as murder because the fetus is human. See the trick? He smuggled the conclusion back into the premise. In other words, abortion is murder because abortion is murder. He hasn't explained anything. There's no reasoning here whatsoever. Just before we continue, do you want to see something crazy? This story of an ex-Biden staffer, Jen Psaki, wondering why Trump spent a week hiding, has been covered by no left-leaning sources, no centrist sources, and hence entirely from right-leaning outlets. Yeah, an entire MSNBC segment simply vanished from the left and centre media ecosystem. This is precisely why ground news has become indispensable to my daily routine. In today's polarised media landscape, entire stories can disappear from your newsfeed depending on which outlets you follow. Ground news cuts through these blind spots, showing you what you're missing. You can follow along at ground.news/rationality. Looking deeper at how the right-leaning outlets covered this story reveals fascinating framings. The New York Sun ran with MSNBC's Jen Psaki mocked and denounced for spreading false rumours about Trump's health after defending Biden. So they're emphasising what they see as stunning hypocrisy. The same press secretary who defended Biden's cognitive abilities for years is now questioning why Trump spent a week in hiding. Conservative Review drives the irony home. Jen Psaki, who never saw signs of Biden's decline, promotes conspiracy theories about Trump's health. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Quite a condemning statement. Meanwhile, PJ Media captures the incredulity. It took a lot of nerve from Jen Psaki to lob this accusation against Trump. So what does the left have to say about this? How do they spin this story? Well, as I said, nothing. They're not reporting on it. Without Ground News' blind spot feature, if you primarily read left or centre sources, you'd have never known that this segment even aired. Whether Psaki's concerns are valid or hypocritical isn't the point. You deserve to know that the conversation exists. Ground News is offering 40% off their Vantage plan at ground.news/rationality. With Vantage, you'll get the full picture, support this channel, and escape the echo chamber by seeing the stories your usual sources won't touch. Thanks.
Why is murder wrong?
Well, because it's a human being, not just because it has consciousness or because it's of a certain age, because it's a human.
Well, what is it that gives human being this moral worth?
Not its consciousness necessarily.
Would you look at this? Kai asked a simple question to clarify. What gives humans moral worth? And Charlie answers with what it's not.
Not its consciousness necessarily.
That is dodge number 4. Suppose you ask someone what they want for dinner and they responded, not Italian, necessarily. Thanks for narrowing down the culinary world, but that's not an answer, Charlie. And his choice word, necessarily, is doing some heavy lifting.
Not its consciousness necessarily.
It's technically hedging, when someone avoids commitment by using vague, cautious, and non-committal language to escape accountability. To provide a random example, if a politician said, many people are saying that mail-in ballots are probably a disaster, we should maybe look into that. Here, the hedges are many people are saying, appeal to anonymous authority, probably and maybe epistemic softeners, and look into that, defers commitment to action. Together, they create the appearance of a claim, while avoiding owning one. Charlie is hedging when he says that it's not necessarily consciousness. He's refusing to commit to the obvious criterion while supplying no alternative. But why is he hedging? Well, it's because he knows that consciousness is actually the strongest candidate for moral worth, but he can't use it because, well, fetuses don't have consciousness. So he's stuck saying it's not necessarily consciousness while offering nothing better. He's essentially admitting his position is built on quicksand while insisting that it's actually solid bedrock. Compounding all of this, Charlie is relying on an implicit strawman fallacy, when someone misrepresents or oversimplifies another person's argument to make it easier to attack. Imagine someone saying, we should spend more money on healthcare. Well, the strawman response would be, oh, so you just want to throw money at lazy people who won't take care of themselves. In this case, it's worse, as Kai hasn't even started to make an argument yet. He's simply trying to figure out where Charlie stands. But Charlie is already looking for an argument to dismiss, essentially delivering, oh, so you think moral worth comes from consciousness, in an attempt to make a position that Kai hasn't even made sound weak.
Not its consciousness necessarily.
I didn't say it's consciousness.
I know that. I can imagine it's because it is a human being, because that has a soul.
Well then, goodbye biology and hello magic. When science doesn't work for you, it's time to invoke the supernatural, which frankly was probably Charlie's next weakest subject, the Bible. So this is where he's decided to play the unfalsifiable claim card. When someone makes a claim that cannot be proven false, making it immune to scrutiny. To borrow Carl Sagan's famous example, there's an invisible dragon living in my garage. You can't see it, but since you can't disprove it, I get to insist that it's there. That is not an argument. That is hiding behind an assertion that you can't check. And notice the timing. Charlie had just tried to pin Kai into a position that he never claimed. Oh, so you think that moral worth comes from consciousness? And Kai refused to play along.
Not its consciousness necessarily.
I didn't say it's consciousness.
The moment that failed, Charlie immediately retreated into unfalsifiable territory with the soul, placing his argument outside of reach and evidence.
Because it is a human being, because that is a soul.
It's the intellectual equivalent of taking your ball and going home, except no one else has actually seen your ball in the first place.
It's because it is a human being, because that is a soul.
And what is this soul? Where does this come from? This idea that it's...
Exactly. I mean, again, the Greeks postulated that it is the entirety of your being.
Oh dear, oh dear. Exactly, Charlie says, as if Kai's skeptical question was somehow agreement. What are you even talking about? That is exactly my point.
Exactly.
One must ask if Charlie was even listening or just preparing the next thing to say. This is a common ground hijack. He's trying to claim Kai is on his side when Kai very clearly isn't. It's a way of dodging the burden of actually defining soul in this case, because if you can pretend your opponent already agrees, you don't have to explain anything.
Exactly.
Talking of evasion, this is dodge number 5, by the way. Kai asked what Charlie means by soul, and instead of defining it, Charlie calls out to the Greeks.
The Greeks postulated that it is the entirety of your being.
It's a classic tactic. When pressed to clarify, don't explain, just point somewhere else. It is the debate equivalent of saying, Google it, a move that's especially common among people who don't actually have an argument for their own view.
Google it! Google it!
In this particular case, it doubles down as an appeal to tradition, when someone claims that something is true because ancient people believed it. Consider if someone argued that bloodletting must work because medieval doctors practiced it for centuries. Charlie does exactly this by invoking Greek philosophy as if antiquity equals validity.
The Greeks postulated...
Because if there's one thing we know, it's that being old automatically makes an idea correct, right? That is why we still think that the sun orbits the Earth. Oh, and as for those Greeks, they couldn't even agree among themselves. Democritus thought that souls were just atoms that would scatter upon our death. Aristotle said that the soul died with the body. Plato believed in reincarnation, which, last I checked, contradicts Christian doctrine. The Stoics thought that souls were material and temporary. Charlie's invoking the Greeks as if they are a neatly rehearsed orchestra, when they were actually more like a philosophical fight club, where everyone had different ideas and nobody agreed on anything. But the funniest thing to me is that Charlie's answer actually strikes me as bong rip philosophy. What's a soul? Oh dude, it's like, it's all of you, man.
Exactly. I mean, again, the Greeks postulated that it is the entirety of your being. Okay, you guys can laugh. I mean, it's true. I mean, every civilization has had a different belief, but agreed upon ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West.
Damn, man, I think that the audience picked up on just how empty that claim was. Those little chuckles, that is the sound of Charlie losing the room. And notice that he doesn't handle it well.
Okay, you guys can laugh. I mean, it's true. I mean,
that defensive acknowledgement is quite revealing. There's nothing quite like watching him nervously explain why everyone shouldn't be laughing. Remember, this was a guy used to stacking the deck, debating less informed opponents in front of crowds of sycophants nodding along. Here, there's no such comfort blanket, and you can tell that he really wasn't ready for it. So, flailing, he gives us this absolute whopper of a hasty generalization fallacy, when someone draws a broad conclusion from a small or underrepresentative sample. It's the equivalent of saying that everyone I know loves pizza, therefore all humans love pizza. Charlie demonstrates this by claiming that all civilizations agreed on ethical monotheism, ignoring polytheistic, secularistic, and animalistic cultures throughout history. Ironically, more common than monotheism.
Every civilization has had a different belief, but agreed upon ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West.
I mean, really? Every civilization agreed upon ethical monotheism. Did he just forget about the ancient Egyptians with their whole pantheon of gods, the Norse with Odin and Thor, Hinduism with its dozens of deities still worshipped today, Buddhism, which doesn't even require a god, the Aztecs, Maya and Inca with their elaborate polytheistic systems. And of course, the best example, seeing as Charlie just invoked them, the Greeks, with Zeus and Athena and their chaotic pantheon. But sure, every civilization agreed.
Every civilization has had a different belief, but agreed upon ethical monotheism.
Even pre-Christian Europe, the very West that we're talking about, was polytheistic for most of its history. The idea of one God who is also the source of morality, as in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, represents a historical minority of civilizations.
Every civilization has had a different belief, but agreed upon ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West and what the birth certificate of my country articulates, is that every human being is more than just matter, it's more than just a clump of cells, but it also has an invisible element to you that will live beyond you.
Right, so there is a lot to unpack here. First, let's look at the language game.
Every human being is more than just matter, it's more than just a clump of cells.
Clumps of cells. He's caricaturing the pro-choice position to make it sound cold and dismissive, then contrasting it with his lofty spiritual framing.
But it also has an invisible element to you that will live beyond you.
It's like portraying your opponent as calling paintings some chemicals on canvas to make your interpretation sound deeper by comparison. It's a subtle straw man slipping in under the radar. As for appealing to the Declaration of Independence, that is some fascinating patriotic mysticism right there.
And what the birth certificate of my country articulates.
It's a rather spectacular failure to read the room. The audience was already laughing along at his spiritual claims, but then he decides to win them back by wrapping his argument in the American flag. I mean, that might work in Texas, but it's going to land with a thud in front of a UK university audience. But it's more than just irrelevant. This is a massive category error. Charlie has conflated political philosophy with theology, treating the Declaration of Independence as if it's scripture. A political document about governance and rights suddenly becomes proof of the afterlife. That's like citing the Constitution to prove the laws of physics. The government can declare whatever it wants, but that doesn't make souls real any more than Congress could vote to repeal Newton's laws of gravity. And what if we humour Charlie for a moment and take a look at the Declaration? Well, it mentions nature's God and creator, but never, not once, talks about souls, afterlife, or any invisible element that will live beyond you. Many founders were deists who explicitly rejected these supernatural claims. Thomas Paine rejected the immortality of the soul. Jefferson literally cut the miracles out of his Bible with scissors, and even Franklin wrote about his doubts regarding the afterlife. These guys weren't exactly lining up for Sunday school. Oh, before we continue, I just want you to notice how far away from the original question we are. Charlie keeps cycling back to the same vague claim. Humans are more than just matter. Only now he's dressed it up in patriotic costume, jewelry, and religious language. Still no actual reasoning, just the same assertion now wearing red, white, and blue.
And what the birth certificate of my country articulates is that every human being is more than just matter, it's more than just a clump of cells, but it also has an invisible element to you that will live beyond you.
Fine, so, can you say that comes from the Bible, or where else do you get that?
Fine, he says. That's not really an agreement. That is Kai essentially saying, whatever, let's move on from your unfalsifiable mysticism. He's trying to pin Charlie down on sources to get to something tangible. And what does Charlie do? Well, the same thing he always does every night.
What do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky.
Hide behind academic-sounding euphemisms.
Can you say that comes from the Bible, or where else do you get that from?
Ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West. And again, the Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times. The founders were explicitly believed, not in a secular morality, but a divinely given one, of at least this idea that there is a God and you are not him.
Look, we all know that Charlie's position comes from the Bible, but instead of just saying that, he keeps using this phrase, ethical monotheism, like it's some kind of neutral scholarly term. And to be fair, it's actually a clever, if dishonest, move.
Ethical monotheism.
By dressing it up this way, Charlie creates distance from Christianity. It makes his stance sound less like a sermon and more like some grand universal tradition. But unfortunately, in reality, it's just a because the Bible tells me so argument, desperately trying to wear a lab coat and thick-rimmed glasses hoping that we won't notice. What's worse though is how he frames it, that we are in a civilizational battle, the creed of the West.
Which is the creed of the West.
He's trying to make it so that disagreeing with him isn't just having a different opinion, it's betraying Western civilization itself. It's the same crap we hear about how anyone who disagrees with Trump's immigration policy hates America. It's subtle here, but this is exactly the sort of rhetoric that fuels the political divide that we face today. This is the sort of dangerous rhetoric Charlie engaged with all the time.
The American Democrat Party hates this country. They want to see it collapse. They love it when America becomes less white.
And again, Charlie drags the founders into it.
The Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times. The founders were explicitly believed, not in a secular morality, but a divinely given one.
Because if waving the Bible doesn't cut it, why not wave the Declaration of Independence instead? Which brings us to the next fallacy on parade, the appeal to false authority. When someone appeals to an authority lacking expertise, treating their opinion as decisive evidence. Imagine claiming that my favourite actor says that vaccines don't work, so it must be true. Charlie does this by treating the Declaration of Independence and the founders as metaphysical authorities, using political documents to prove the existence of souls, a misuse of authority. The founders were creating a government, not writing metaphysics textbooks. Oh, and just a quick reality check on those 4 mentions of God.
The Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times.
They're deistic references, typically of Enlightenment philosophy, not ethical monotheism, and certainly not Christian theology, which is what he's actually alluding to. Now, the Constitution, the actual governing document, never mentions God at all and explicitly prohibits religious tests for office. The Treaty of Tripoli, signed during Washington's presidency and ratified under Adams, literally states the government of the United States of America is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion. But sure, Charlie, tell us more about how America is supposedly a Christian country.
Again, there is no separation of church and state. It's a fabrication. It's a fiction. It's not in the Constitution. It's made up by secular humanists.
And then there's this weird addition. There is a God and you are not him.
That there is a God and you are not him.
Excuse me, where did that come from? That's not advancing any argument about abortion or souls. It's a moral finger wag, an accusation of hubris. Charlie's essentially saying that disagreeing with his religious framing means that you think that you're God. It's the kind of thing that Christians say to guilt one another, but against a medical student asking for advice, it just sounds desperate. Oh, and before we move on, this is yet another dodge. Where does his evidence of souls come from? Well, the founding fathers believed in divine morality. Not an answer.
The founders were explicitly believed, not in a secular morality, but a divinely given one, of at least this idea that there is a God and you are not him. And let me ask you, what is the first stage of human development?
So this is the thing, right?
Here we go again. Charlie's signature move when cornered. Can't defend your position? Flip the table and become the prosecutor.
And let me ask you.
Rather than answering any difficult questions, he pivots from defendant to interrogator, forcing Kai to justify claims while his own remain unexamined. It's like being pressed on your taxes and then cutting in with, well, where are Hillary's emails? It's just cowardly.
Almost every lawyer says you don't release your returns until the audit's complete. When the audit's complete, I'll do it. But I would go against them if she releases her email.
So it's negotiable?
It's not negotiable. No, let her release the email. Why did she delete 33,000
Well, I'll let her.
I'm going to keep pointing it out. We still haven't got an answer about how souls make abortion murder. Unfortunately, Charlie successfully avoids providing any foundation for his defense by going on the attack instead.
And let me ask you.
Honestly, that was his debate strategy every time I saw him, and he was damn good at it. And let's be clear, this isn't even a real question. Charlie knew the answer, everyone does. This is a classic political move. Ask a question you already know so that you can reframe the answer in your way. It's not curiosity, it's a setup.
And let me ask you, what is the first stage of human development?
So this is the thing, right? We can take it from the sperm being generated in the father and the oocyte being generated in the mother, right? They fuse at birth, conception, sorry. The only thing that happens at conception is these 2 cells fuse.
Beautiful move from Kai here. He uses technological terminology, emphasizes the only thing that happens, and frames conception as what it actually is, cells fusing, not some magical moment of ensoulment. He's stripping away Charlie's mystical framing with the precise language of actual biology.
The only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse.
No, DNA is created. A zygote.
DNA is not created.
A DNA. No, that's not true. The DNA.
Charlie,
The
Charlie.
DNA coding at the zygote. Hold on. Time out.
Oh my, Charlie just tried to contradict Kai on basic biology and immediately realized that he's out of his depth. And so what does he do? He literally calls a timeout like this is a basketball game. When you can't win on substance, control the procedure. When you can't control the facts, control who gets to speak.
Hold on. Time out.
And let me be clear here, DNA is not created at conception. The sperm brings 23 chromosomes, the egg brings 23 chromosomes, and they combine into a cell with 46 chromosomes. It's combination, not creation. This is like 10th grade biology, not advanced medical knowledge.
Time out.
I'll let you finish.
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Charlie,
Does a zygote have a unique
you
marker?
have to let me speak. You have to
Answer it, yes or
Charlie.
no. Does a zygote have a unique marker?
See what I mean by his favourite tactic? Launch the attack rather than deal with any problems in his own viewpoint. Look at the pivot. Charlie goes from being wrong about DNA to immediately launching an interrogation about unique markers, and he's desperate to barrel over the conversation and force Kai onto the track that he's laying out.
Does a zygote have a unique marker? Does a zygote have a unique
have to
marker?
let-
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
The repetition here isn't about getting an answer, it's about dominance. Charlie's trying to regain control through sheer verbal force. Say it loud enough, often enough, and maybe people will forget that you flunked basic biology. Meanwhile, Kai is a calm, steady authority. He's not getting flustered, he just simply points out that Charlie's being a conversational bully. It's a perfect contrast. Charlie looks unhinged, Kai looks like he's the adult in the room.
You have to let me speak. You have to
Answer it, yes or no.
Charlie.
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
But what about this whole yes or no demand? The question assumes that we all agree on what a unique marker means, but that term is doing a lot of undefined work. It's like asking, yes or no, is water wet? And if you're confused by the example, well, consider the fact that wet is defined as covered or saturated with water. So, is water itself covered in water? Depending on how you define it, the answer could be yes or no. The question looks simple, but it's built on shaky definitions. The same is true with unique marker.
Answer it, yes or no.
Also, let's note the irony here. Charlie has dodged every single one of Kai's questions, but when Kai wants to give a nuanced answer, suddenly that's evasion. It's projection worthy of an IMAX theatre.
Answer it, yes or no.
Charlie.
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
define a unique marker.
Meaning, can you differentiate the DNA coding between the mother and the zygote if you examine it under a deoxyribonucleic acid analysis? Can you?
Perfect. Kai refuses the false binary and demands clarity, forcing Charlie to actually explain what he means instead of hiding behind ambiguous terms.
Define a unique marker.
Well, it should have forced him to clarify, but instead we get dodge number 10. Instead of defining unique marker, he launches into scientific-sounding word salad.
If you examine it under a deoxyribonucleic acid analysis, can you?
My dude, that's just saying DNA test with extra syllables. It's like saying utilize ocular observation instead of look at it. You're not sounding scientific, you're sounding like someone who swallowed a medical dictionary and is now randomly spouting terminology. Consider what he actually just said. Can you tell the difference between a mother's DNA and her child's DNA with a DNA test? That's it. Which, sure, but that doesn't answer the question, because unique marker could mean all kinds of things. A generic fingerprint, a way of tracking ancestry, whatever you want it to mean. It's vague as hell.
Can you differentiate the DNA coding between the mother and the zygote if you examine it under a deoxyribonucleic acid analysis? Can you?
Only purely because the addition comes from the father.
Oh, so it is something different.
And here comes Charlie's gotcha moment, or at least what he thinks is a gotcha. He's acting as if Kai just admitted something profound when all Kai said is that offspring DNA includes genetic material from both parents. Shocking revelation, I know. Children are genetically related to both parents. Stop the presses.
Because the addition comes from the father.
Logically speaking, this is an equivocation fallacy, when someone uses a word in two different ways within the same argument to mislead. It's like saying free speech is under attack and then clarifying that by free speech you mean the right to never be criticized. Charlie does this with different, twisting different DNA, a recombination of parental genes, into newly created essence. as if recombination is creation.
Can you differentiate the DNA coding between the mother and the zygote?
Yes, the DNA is different in the same way that shuffling a deck of cards gives you a different arrangement. You haven't created new cards, you've rearranged existing ones. But here's a pretty big problem that I don't think that Charlie ever considered. If he really wants to tie moral worth to this idea of a unique marker, then we arrive at an absurd little time bomb. Identical twins don't have unique DNA markers. They are genetic copies of one another. Just to be clear, at conception, there's one zygote, one genome. After conception, the zygote splits, creating two embryos with identical DNA. So by Charlie's framework, only one twin could count as a full human being, while the other would, what? Be a duplicate with no rights. Well then, better hope that you're the first twin born. Or maybe they get half a so. I don't know how this works. I don't know how this is meant to work.
Oh, so it is something different.
Charlie, DNA is not created. DNA is not created. You have, the father has his own genome, the mother has her own genome. They fuse. This is why you have the same characteristics, similar ones to your mother, similar ones to your father. That's why you have similar characteristics to your siblings. DNA is not created, right?
I completely understand Kai's exasperation here. He's got to the point where he's basically grabbing Charlie by the shoulders and trying to shake basic biology into him. But the repetition of DNA is not created isn't just frustration, it's effective rhetoric for the audience.
Charlie, DNA is not created.
It's simple, clear, and cuts through Charlie's obfuscation, and he follows it up with careful, patient explanation. Biology made simple, explaining genetics through family resemblance.
They fuse. This is why you have the same characteristics, similar ones to your mother, similar ones to your father. That's why you have similar characteristics to your siblings.
Something that everyone can understand. Your nose looks like your mother's, your eyes look like your father's. You and your siblings share features. This isn't because DNA magically appeared. It's because you're all working with mixed versions of the same genetic playbook. And with the audience now grounded in something familiar, Kai can zoom back out to the big question that Charlie keeps dodging. When does human life actually begin?
DNA is not created, right? So when you ask me, where does a human being come from? I can say to you, it starts at conception, but all conception is these two cells joining, right? But these two cells were created, the mother cells were created long before, they were created when she was a fetus. So there's none of this DNA being produced, right? So we can't establish, the only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse. Now this idea that means that for some reason suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these two cells who had half the DNA.
This is where Kai really shines. He's not just explaining biology, he's dismantling Charlie's entire philosophical framework. He's showing that conception isn't a beginning, it's a continuation. The egg has been sitting there since the mother was a fetus herself. The sperm was made weeks ago. The DNA already existed. Where's the magic moment of creation in this continuous biological process?
The only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse. Now this idea that means that for some reason suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these two cells who had half the DNA.
And this is the crucial point. What is it about physical proximity that suddenly generates a soul? If combining DNA creates moral worth, why didn't the separate gametes have it moments before? It's like saying peanut butter is meaningless without jelly, but the moment they meet, boom, sacred soul sandwich. It might be tasty, sure, but did the ingredients not have flavour of their own before? That's the weakness that Charlie can't escape. He needs there to be a single sharp moment when personhood begins. But biology doesn't work in moments, it works in processes, and pretending that gradual continuation has a sudden moral switch is, well, I'm afraid, yet another fallacy. The false dichotomy, when someone insists on an either-or choice when reality presents a spectrum or continuum. It's like insisting that it's either day or night, full stop, ignoring the slow transition of the sun across the sky as it moves through dusk. And no, like biology, lengthening shadows and the sun appearing orange isn't liberal propaganda.
Wrong.
In any case, Charlie's argument hinges on pretending the gradual process has a single magical switch point.
The only thing that happens at conception is these two cells fuse. Now this idea that means that for some reason suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these two cells who had half the DNA. But suddenly there's a
Correct. Yes, something magical happens at that.
It's not.
And there it is. After all the attempted science, all the philosophical posturing, all the appeals to the Greeks and the founders, Charlie just blurts out his actual view. Something magical happens. He's retreating to pure mysticism because every other defense has crumbled. But do you know what? At least he's finally being honest. We can stop pretending that this is about DNA or unique markers or whatever the Greeks thought. It's magic. That's his argument. Magic.
Correct. Yes, something magical happens.
Now, of course, by calling it magical, Charlie just handed Kai the debate. He admits that he has no rational explanation for why conception should be the moment that matters. When your best argument is literally, it's magic, you are firmly in the realm of fairy tales. I'm sorry, but we really have to pause here to appreciate what an utter failure this is. Magic.
Magical happens.
Anyway, what he's doing has a name. It's the appeal to mystery fallacy, when someone proposes that there can be no explanation for something, so instead they appeal to the supernatural. Imagine saying, we don't know how disease spreads, so it must be witchcraft. Charlie does this by saying something magical happens, using the language of wonder to cover his total lack of knowledge.
Something magical happens.
But obviously, we know that mystery isn't an argument, and our lack of understanding doesn't make something morally significant. Lightning was mysterious once, but that didn't make it divine.
Correct. Yes, something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
This is the most brutal moment of the entire debate. It is a simple response, but sometimes that is all it takes. Charlie wrapped himself in vagueness and mysticism, and Kai, well...
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
Contrary to Charlie's confidence, conception isn't a mystery. It's one of the most studied biological processes in human history. We can observe it under a microscope. We can replicate it in a petri dish. We understand it pretty damn well. Hence the applause saying it all. This is the moment, the turning point, where Charlie's position collapsed into admitted irrationality, and everyone in the room knew it.
Well, hold on.
Charlie.
Time out. Hold on.
Charlie, I promise you, I'm not trying to score points. I'm not trying to score points on you.
This is a disaster for Charlie. He knows that he's just lost. And worse, he knows the audience knows it too.
Time out. Hold on.
His pleading for time out isn't directed specifically at Kai. It's to the whole room as well. When you can't win the debate, try to stop the game. Delay, dilute, delay. It's not working, but it's all he has left.
I'm not trying to score points on you. This is genuine.
We call it the miracle of life for a reason. We've not been able to yet replicate human life development outside of the womb.
Oh boy, talk about moving the goalpost, huh? When someone keeps changing the criteria so their position can't be proven wrong. Essentially, a claim gets sufficiently rebutted, so instead of admitting it, you just demand different evidence. Think of a typical anti-vaxxer. They start with, I won't get the COVID vaccine because it's not safe. So you point out the safety trials, the mountains of data, the approval process, and instantly it shifts to, well, I don't believe those sources. It's never about evidence. It's about retreating to whatever evidence can't reach. Charlie does exactly this. I mean, let's follow the dialectic so far. First, it was about DNA being created, which was wrong.
No, DNA is created. A zygote.
DNA is not created.
A DNA, no, that's not true.
Then about unique markers, which was undefined.
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Then about magic, where he got laughed at.
Correct. Yes, something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
Well, hold on.
And now it's about whether we can grow babies in artificial wombs. I mean, pick a lane.
We've not been able to yet replicate human life development outside of the womb.
And notice what's hidden inside the goalpost moving. An appeal to ignorance, when someone claims that something is true because it hasn't been proven false, or vice versa. Bertrand Russell gave us a classic example. Nobody can prove that there is not between the Earth and Mars a china teapot revolving in an elliptical orbit. And, as he put it, if I were to go on to say that, since my assertion cannot be disproved, it is an intolerable presumption on the part of human reason to doubt it, I should rightly be thought to be talking nonsense. Charlie does this by arguing that because we haven't fully replicated human development outside of the womb, it must be miraculous, magic.
Something magical happens.
But come on, you know what else we can't replicate? The exact conditions inside the sun. But this doesn't mean that fusion is magical, it just means that some things are technically complex, or, in some other cases, ethically restricted. Making this worse, Charlie's declared fact is not, in fact, a fact. Scientists have successfully grown embryos outside of the womb for up to 14 days, the legal limit in most countries. IVF routines create and develop embryos outside of the womb before implantation. Adding to this, we have grown mouse embryos in artificial wombs to near full term. In 2021, Israeli scientists grew mouse embryos for 11 days, half their entire gestation, in artificial wombs. The limitation isn't scientific impossibility, but ethical and legal restrictions. So, as usual, Charlie reveals that he doesn't know what he's talking about.
We call it the miracle of life for a reason. We've not been able to yet replicate human life development outside of the womb.
We call it the miracle of life because yes, it's something beautiful, the ability to
exactly.
form a new...
Magical.
It's not... You say magical as in, oh, it's beautiful, it's an incredible thing that happens, of course. But it's not incredible in the sense we don't know what's going on. There's no new DNA coming out of nowhere.
There's quite the terminological clash happening here, and it reveals the mindset behind both speakers. Charlie uses miracle and magical literally as if divine intervention is at work.
Something magical happens. We call it the miracle of life for a reason.
Kai counters by reframing to metaphorically beautiful, incredible, expressions of wonder stripped of supernatural baggage. It's diplomatic brilliance. Kai manages to validate the emotional appeal while maintaining scientific accuracy. You can appreciate something deeply without declaring that it's supernatural.
You say magical as in, oh, it's beautiful, it's an incredible thing that happens, of course.
But Charlie won't allow any meeting in the middle because he can't. He immediately retranslates beautiful back into magical.
We call it the miracle of life because yes, it's something beautiful, the ability to form a new...
Magical.
If he were consistent, if Kai were to say to him that sunsets are beautiful, he'd respond by saying, "Ha! So you agree that there's proof of divine intervention?" No, not at all. It's not magic. It's not beyond understanding. We can be amazed by something while still knowing exactly how it works. Again, lightning is incredible too. Doesn't mean Zeus is throwing bolts.
But it's not incredible in the sense we don't know what's going on. There's no new DNA coming out of nowhere.
Hold on, but time out. Isn't there a separate DNA though than the mother?
Yes, from the father.
Okay, yes, but it's not the father's DNA either. A new coding is created.
Charlie,
you are a blend of the two, and you're...
Come on, Charlie. DNA is not created. Kai's been trying to say this over and over, yet Charlie keeps trying to drag him back to the same dead end. And we see that his constant pivots and inability to move past the defeated point have lost the audience altogether now. They're even laughing at him when he tries to force Kai down the rails.
Isn't there a separate DNA though than the mother?
Yes, from the father.
Okay, yes, but then...
With his sentences literally falling apart mid-thought, he ends up running to pure argument from repetition, when someone repeats a claim over and over to create the illusion of strength. It's the same tactic that we saw from Trump in 2020, yelling rigged election on Twitter 100 times a day. No new evidence, no new reasoning, just hammering the same phrase until his supporters started chanting it back like it was the new national anthem.
Because that election was rigged and stolen, and we can't allow that to happen.
Say it loud enough, often enough, and maybe people will stop noticing that it was never backed up in the first place. After all the corrections, all the explanations, Charlie is clutching to his fundamental misunderstanding like it's a life raft. But, as Kai keeps explaining, no new coding is created. The genetic code, the rules for translating DNA to proteins, remains precisely the same.
There's no new DNA coming out of nowhere.
The genome is just a combination of existing parental DNA through meiosis and fertilization.
Isn't there a separate DNA though than the mother?
Yes, from the father.
Yes, there are about 60 random mutations per generation, but those are copying errors that happen all the time in cell division, not some magical new coding exclusive to conception.
Yes, but it's not the father's DNA either. A new coding is created.
Charlie,
you are a blend of the two. And so when did your life begin?
Oh, look at that. Charlie is switching it up again. Can't defend the new coding claim? Well, quick, throw up a new question. When did your life begin?
So when did your life begin?
If you've watched his other debates, then you'll know that this is his core, rhetorical whack-a-mole. Once one claim gets hammered down, pop, up comes another, hoping that the audience forgets that the last one already crumbled.
I don't even want to take this detour, but can we both agree on what a woman is?
Yes, an adult human female.
But one thing always impressed me. Charlie was really good at this. He could quickly pivot to the next thing whenever he was cornered.
So when did your life begin?
Okay, so
when did your life
begin? I mean, again, this comes from what you define as where life starts. You can say life starts at conception, but I'm telling you, I believe that's just an arbitrary point, right? That's just the moment these two cells fuse.
Can you see what Charlie's doing? As soon as Kai tries to respond, Charlie hammers the question again.
So when did your life begin?
Okay, so
When did your life begin?
It's a stalling tactic. He's trying to buy himself space to recover while boxing Kai into his script. If Kai is forced to answer only on Charlie's terms, Charlie stays in control. But Kai doesn't bite. He pushes through and keeps it principled, exposing that Charlie has done little more than draw an arbitrary line in the sand. Why this point? Why the moment that cells fuse? Kai refuses to play by Charlie's script, and that makes the dodge all the more obvious.
You can say life starts at conception, but I'm telling you, I believe that's just an arbitrary point, right? That's just the moment these two cells fuse. Now, you say about this mother thing. So the way DNA is arranged in a cell is it's arranged in chromosomes. Chromosomes are paired up, so you have one from the mother, one from the father, typically, in a healthy individual, right? Now, you can take those maternal chromosomes out, and you can find that this is who the person's mother is, and you can do the same with the father. Now, the reason you are different to your mother and father is because some of those chromosomes express genes that are different from each other, and so those genes interact, and that's what gives rise to you, right? But there's no space for any kind of moral framework to come into that until you consider that a human being is capable of consciousness and of suffering.
Now that was pristine. It's clear, it's precise, it's accessible. Kai is laying out genetics like he's explaining it to a friend over coffee. Chromosomes, gene expression, parental inheritance, it's all there, and it all makes sense. And in this process, he once again quietly establishes himself as the intellectual authority, especially against Charlie's earlier fumbling over, well, how babies are made. But Kai doesn't stop at the biology lesson. He connects it directly to moral philosophy, that conscious element that Charlie has all along been trying desperately to avoid.
There's no space for any kind of moral framework to come into that until you consider that a human being is capable of consciousness and of suffering.
DNA alone carries no moral weight. It can't, or else Charlie would have to claim that sperm is sacred. By that logic, every man that masturbates is committing genocide.
Every sperm is sacred.
What makes more sense, so argues Kai, is that moral consideration only emerges with consciousness and suffering. Kai is building a bridge from empirical facts to ethical principles. It's what Charlie's been trying to do in this entire debate, except Kai actually succeeds because his bridge has, you know, a non-arbitrary principle.
There's no space for any kind of moral framework to come into that until you consider that a human being is capable of consciousness and of suffering. But if you take that out of the equation, the fact that these two DNA, whatever they call molecules, right? These two DNA molecules are fusing, that does not suddenly flip a switch that attributes moral worth to that individual.
Kai has completely nailed Charlie to the wall here, demanding that he provide justification for the line that he keeps trying to draw. The audience gets it immediately, hence the applause. Kai's point is excruciatingly clear. Biology is continuous, so why should personhood suddenly flick on with DNA fusion? But because he's framed it as a statement instead of a direct question, Charlie seizes the opening to wriggle out.
I'm just saying, I'm not trying to score points. I'm trying to understand.
By what moral standard do you believe that?
It's nothing but a diversion, a way to drag the conversation off the scientific ground where Charlie just got flattened to examine Kai's ethical position instead. Remember when I said that Charlie couldn't defend? He always has to switch to being the attacker. Here it is again.
By what moral standard do you believe that?
I believe that if an individual is capable of suffering, then it's wrong. Now, can I explain my opinion on abortion, just so you can understand? I would agree, as many reasonable people would, that at 9 months, it's unreasonable to expect someone to get an abortion, right? Unless you have some extreme circumstances. But for an elective abortion seems a bit radical to me.
After having to wade through the mystical bullshit, Kai offers a clear, intuitive moral standard. Suffering is bad. It's not complicated, it's not magical, it's just a basic principle that most humans understand and share. Then he does something brilliant. He stakes out the reasonable middle ground, the position that most countries typically have.
At 9 months, it's unreasonable to expect someone to get an abortion, right? Unless you have some extreme circumstances. But for an elective abortion seems a bit radical to me.
By rejecting both extremes, long-term elective abortion and total prohibition, Kai positions himself as the pragmatic moderate. That framing instantly exposes Charlie's absolutism as radical by comparison. And when you look at the data, Kai's stance only gets stronger. Less than 1% of abortions occur after 21 weeks, almost always for severe fetal abnormalities or risks to the mother's life. Let me repeat that. Less than 1% of abortions occur after 21 weeks. 1%. Meanwhile, about 91% happen in the first trimester, when, according to medical consensus, the fetus has no capability for consciousness or pain perception at all. Kai's position reflects both medical reality and common moral intuitions. Charlie's side, on the other hand, survives by pretending that abortions always mean ripping apart fully formed babies, which is about as accurate as their grasp on DNA.
For an elective abortion seems a bit radical to me. But it also seems radical to say that a woman who has just, the cells have just fused, to deny her of an abortion also seems wrong to me. Because that zygote is not capable of suffering, as far as we know.
Granted, Kai's rhetoric, or lack thereof, slightly undercuts his punch. Charlie's absolutist style will always sound more concrete in the moment, but it's also the mark of genuine intellectual honesty. Kai acknowledges uncertainty. Charlie pretends to have certainty.
That zygote is not capable of suffering, as far as we know.
And for the record, current neurological science is firmly on Kai's side. Consciousness and pain perception aren't even possible until well into pregnancy. Neurological structures for awareness don't form until around 24 to 26 weeks, with the thalamocortical connections for conscious experience only becoming established by the third trimester. A zygote, of course, has no neurons at all. Kai's point is directly aligned with medical consensus.
So by what moral standard? Is that just your opinion? Where did you get that moral standard from?
Charlie is completely stuck on repeat. This is the same question he already asked, which was already answered.
By what moral standard do you believe that?
When you've got nothing new, just keep asking the same thing and hope that everyone forgets that you're going in circles. It's the debate equivalent of a skipping record, except less entertaining.
Is that just your opinion? Where did you get that moral standard from?
Because suffering is a bad thing. We all know suffering is a bad thing. That's an objective fact, right?
Well, hold on. So you do believe in objective morality.
Charlie's eyes light up with the chance of a gotcha. You see, Kai may have slipped up by using the word objective.
We all know suffering is a bad thing. That's an objective fact, right?
Well,
what he was trying to do is ground morality in shared human truth, that suffering is bad, and contrast that with Charlie's abstract philosophy or divine command. It's intuitive, accessible, and honestly, kind of hard to argue against. But Charlie pounces on that single word, allowing him to pivot.
Hold on. So you do believe in objective morality?
I believe that suffering is an objectively negative feeling.
If you can't...
This was a smart move from Kai. He keeps his answer narrow and precise, limiting objective to a single point that suffering is bad. That shuts down Charlie's attempted overreach and, for a brief moment, even forces him to ask something relevant to Kai's position. Of course, it won't last, but it's a rare instance of Kai steering Charlie back on track.
Suffering is an objectively negative
So if you can't feel it, is it okay?
Charlie barrels straight into a straw man. He takes Kai's carefully constructed point that consciousness and suffering are the foundation of moral consideration, and flattens it into this absurd caricature. If you can't feel it, then anything goes. That is not what Kai said. That's not even close to what Kai said. It's just a weak, very weak version of what Charlie wishes Kai had said, because it would be easier to attack.
So if you can't feel it, is it okay?
Now, this specific strawman has emerged from a failed reductio ad absurdum. Let me explain. A reductio is when someone takes their opponent's reasoning and stretches it out to the extreme to show that it doesn't hold up. Done well, it is devastating. In fact, we did it a little earlier when we highlighted how Charlie's obsession with unique markers would lead to issues around identical twins. So by Charlie's framework, only one twin could count as a full human being, while the other would, what? Be a duplicate with no rights. We also covered, at length, Tilly Middlehurst applying this very method against Charlie in this same debate, no less.
We should shut off Muslim immigration to the UK, right? We totally agree.
I think that all religious fundamentalism is bad, and if you take that logic, we should also not allow evangelical Christians into the UK either.
Hold on a second. Hold on. That's funny.
But look what Charlie's doing. Kai says suffering matters. Charlie stretches it into...
So if you can't feel it, is it okay?
That is not a logical extension. It's a cartoon. It doesn't reveal a flaw in Kai's principle. All it really reveals is Charlie's failure to grasp the principle he's trying to attack.
So if you can't feel it, is it okay?
What do you mean if you can't?
You can't feel the pain, is it okay to inflict the pain?
I mean, this question self-destructs under any examination. If someone truly cannot feel pain, then, by definition, you cannot inflict pain on them. There's no pain to inflict. It's like asking if you can bruise a rock. A rock can't get bruised. So the question doesn't make sense. Charlie's built a scenario that treats pain as both present and absent simultaneously. He's not even making a coherent challenge at this point.
What do you mean if you can't?
You can't feel the pain, is it okay to inflict the pain?
In the sense that if no one's suffering from it, if you have a scenario where nobody is suffering from something, then yes, of course. Something is only a moral question if it affects someone's well-being.
Amid Charlie's half-baked logic, Kai stays logically consistent with his principle. Morality is about well-being and suffering. If no one is affected, then there's no moral question.
Something is only a moral question if it affects someone's well-being.
I mean, think about it. It's like asking if it's morally wrong to insult a rock. The rock itself doesn't care, it can't suffer. No suffering means no victim, and no victim means no moral problem. Charlie thinks that he's cornered Kai, but all Kai's answer does is reinforce the clarity of his framework. Morality tracks suffering, and if suffering is absent, so is the moral question.
Something is only a moral question if it affects someone's well-being.
So let me just make sure I understand this correctly. That if it doesn't affect their well-being, so dementia patients that don't know who they are or where they're from, can we execute dementia patients because they're confused about their well-being?
Wholly inappropriate escalation, Batman. We just swerved hard from abortion to executing dementia patients. Adding to the obvious straw man, this is the peak of slippery slope fallacies, when someone claims that one position inevitably leads to an extreme consequence without logical connection. It's the Fox News classic. Teach kids about racism and history, and boom, they'll all become Marxists overnight, plotting the downfall of America. Or the marriage equivalent panic. If two men can get married, next you'll be saying you can marry children, which is extra rich, of course, considering that child marriages in the US mostly happen in Republican states and are almost always defended under the banner of religious freedom. But here's the ugliest part. Charlie reduces dementia to confusion, like it's just forgetting where you put your keys.
Can we execute dementia patients because they're confused about their well-being?
This bad faith framing strips away the humanity of dementia patients to score a cheap rhetorical point. That's not just sloppy, it is dehumanizing. Though, I can't say that I'm surprised here. Here's the reality. Dementia patients absolutely do suffer. Multiple studies show that they experience physical pain, emotional distress, and anxiety, even if they can't always articulate it. The International Association for the Study of Pain is clear. Cognitive decline doesn't erase pain perception. Their suffering is real. Charlie's premise is flat out morally false.
So let me just make sure I understand this correctly. That if it doesn't affect their well-being, so dementia patients that don't know who they are or where they're from, can we execute dementia patients because they're confused about their well-being?
Can you imagine a scenario?
Or Alzheimer's patients.
Charlie,
Alzheimer's patients don't really know much about anything. Can we schedule them for execution because they can't technically suffer?
Charlie doubles down, dragging Alzheimer's patients into this nonsense and claiming they can't technically suffer. But that's flat out contradicted by the science. Studies published in Pain Medicine and the Journal of Pain show that Alzheimer's patients continue to experience both physical and emotional pain throughout their illness. They retain functional pain receptors, emotional responses, and the neurological structures necessary for suffering. Charlie's assertion erases the lived reality of patients and their families. He's grossly confident and yet, once again, grossly wrong.
Can we schedule them for execution because they can't technically suffer?
No response.
A subtle remark, but all the same brilliant. Kai asking if he can respond highlights that he has to ask for permission to speak because Charlie's bulldozing over him. It's a small moment that reveals everything about their respective styles. One guy is steamrolling, interrupting, trying to control the room through sheer volume. The other is calmly asking for conversational courtesy.
No response. So can you imagine a scenario where we lived in a society where we killed people when they suffered from dementia, were incapable of suffering, and we killed them, right? That does not it's not a scenario that involves an absence of suffering. There's still suffering involved. Imagine you grow up thinking, my dad could be killed at any moment because he's going to get dementia. Imagine living your life thinking, I could get dementia and suddenly I'd be killed by my state.
Kai is 2 steps ahead. He doesn't just swat down Charlie's false premise, he zooms out to show the broader implications. Even if, and this is a massive if, dementia patients themselves couldn't suffer, which again they can, the horror wouldn't vanish. People who might one day develop dementia would live under a constant shadow of fear. Their families would suffer, society would suffer. The dread alone would ripple out like shockwaves. By framing it with imagine, Kai forces the audience into that nightmare world. It's no longer an abstract back and forth, it is personal, it's visceral, and it turns Charlie's shock tactic completely against him. Yes, this scenario is horrifying, and that is exactly why the argument fails.
Imagine living your life thinking, I could get dementia and suddenly I'd be killed by my state.
Imagine a world where you slaughter 1 million babies every year in America.
For goodness sake, there it is, another dodge, and a nuclear one at that. What's that? Can't win on logic. Can't win on science, can't win on philosophy. Well, it's time to break out the slaughtering babies.
Imagine a world where you slaughter 1 million babies every year in America.
It's lazy emotional manipulation. He's given up on arguing and resorted to the rhetorical equivalent of flipping the chessboard when losing the game. So let's strip away the theatrics and look at the reality. In 2023, there were approximately 1 million abortions in the US. But here's the detail that Charlie won't mention. 93% happened at 13 weeks or earlier, when the embryo or fetus is less than 3 inches long, has no consciousness, and no capacity for pain.
You slaughter 1 million babies every year in America.
The term babies is medically inaccurate. It's being used deliberately to alter the perception of the topic in the mind of the audience, trying to get them to picture a fully formed newborn instead of what actually exists at that stage. The correct term is embryo for up to 8 weeks, and fetus after 8 weeks. And the word slaughter, it implies cruelty and deliberate suffering, overwhelming pain being inflicted. But again, in early procedures, there is no capacity for pain. This is one of the most frustrating tricks that Charlie, and honestly, American conservative media in general, pulls. They lie to your face, they load the language with emotional triggers, and they hope that the outrage will outweigh the evidence. And it often does.
Imagine a world where you slaughter 1 million babies every year in America.
Charlie, it's not slaughter, that's the problem.
Hold on, if it's a forcible removal from the umbilical cord of another human life.
I think that Charlie forgot that he was debating a medical student. There was no way that Kai was going to swallow Charlie's loaded framing, and he pushes straight for the medical reality. Good for him.
It's not slaughter, that's the problem.
Hold on, if it's a forcible removal from the umbilical cord.
And then Charlie opens his mouth. In very early pregnancies, there isn't even a fully developed umbilical cord. And guess what? Around 65% of abortions happen at 8 weeks or earlier. On top of that, roughly 63% of abortions today are medical, done with pills. So there is no overwhelming forcible removal in the graphic way that Charlie implies. The embryo or fetus is expelled naturally. So Charlie's not just being emotionally manipulative, he's anatomically wrong for the overwhelming majority of cases. He's painting a horror movie image that doesn't reflect medical reality. It's about as absurd as describing clipping your nails as forcibly tearing keratin from living flesh, or describing shearing a sheep as savagely skinning it alive.
Charlie, it's not slaughter, that's the problem.
Hold on, if it's a forcible removal from the umbilical cord of another human life, again, we have clarity but not agreement. Biologically, you know that your entire coding began at conception. Your coding,
that's
your uniqueness.
Ah yes, the false equivalence, when someone treats two opposing positions as if they're logically equal just because they share one superficial trait. For example, saying a doctor's medical diagnosis and a friend's horoscope are both valid perspectives on your health. They may both be opinions, sure, but only one is grounded in evidence. And that's what Charlie's doing here, putting Kai's science on the same shelf as his own magical claim, as if they deserve equal weight. They don't.
Biologically, you know that your entire coding began at conception.
And right on cue, he circles back to your entire coding began at your conception. Kai dismantled this already, multiple times in fact, but when you've got nothing else, I guess you just keep going back to your greatest hits. even if everyone's already sick of the song.
Biologically, you know that your entire coding began at conception. Your coding,
No, that's
your
what,
uniqueness.
That's what I'm denying. I disagree with that.
Okay, when those two cells fused together, to use your terminology,
Yes.
that is where the process of human...
scientifically accepted terminology.
Kai explicitly denies Charlie's claim, not as a matter of personal opinion, but as a matter of fact. That distinction matters to the audience. It matters to anyone that cares about truth. And then he drives home the point. Fused cells isn't his quirky terminology, it is the scientifically accepted terminology. This isn't Kai making something up to win a debate. It is biology 101.
When those two cells fused together, to use your terminology,
Yes.
that is where the process of human...
scientifically accepted terminology.
That correction makes clear what's really at stake. It's not Kai's view versus Charlie's view. It's science versus ideology, evidence versus assertion, modernity versus antiquity. It's a medical student calmly citing the consensus of his field against an ill-informed pundit desperately trying to rebrand basic biology as just your interpretation.
Scientifically accepted terminology.
In the interest of time, can we bring this question to a
The
close?
process of human development objectively begins at that moment. Therefore, those human beings are deserving of human rights. We keep going, or do you want to...
The moderator throws Charlie a life preserver just as he's going down for the third time. But notice that he tries to sneak in one more fallacy, a non sequitur. Latin for it does not follow. This is when someone leaps to a conclusion that the premise simply doesn't justify. The leap looks tidy on the surface, but there's no logical bridge holding it up. It's like stating the founders wrote the word creator in the Declaration of Independence, therefore the US legal system must follow the Bible. Charlie is saying human development begins at conception, therefore it deserves full legal rights the moment the process begins.
The process of human development objectively begins at that moment. Therefore, those human beings are deserving of human rights.
Even if you grant the premise that development begins at conception, the conclusion about rights doesn't follow automatically. It skips the entire argument about why biological beginnings should equal moral or legal personhood. After all that, he clutches the moderator's offer.
We keep going, or do you want to...
He tries to make it look like he's the one ending the exchange, rather than being saved by the bell.
We keep going, or do you want to...
No, thank you. That's... Yeah, you can finish.
The process of development begins from the moment the sperm is being generated in the father, the moment the eggs are being generated in the mother. To say that suddenly the moral worth switches on when they fuse doesn't make any sense. That's just a point you've taken.
It makes perfect sense, because that is when your journey as a human being, when the sperm and egg were separate, you were not yet a fused human being. You were not created uniquely.
DNA existed.
In image.
Kai is pulling everything together, the sum of his case, in one clean line of reasoning. If we have to declare a moment when moral worth magically switches on, why conception? Why not the gametes forming? Why not implantation? Why not the first cell splitting? Why not consciousness? Human development is continuous, so Charlie's line in the sand is just that. It's a line he drew, not one provided by biology.
To say that suddenly the moral worth switches on when they fuse doesn't make any sense. That's just a point you've taken.
But will Charlie finally recognize that his line is arbitrary? Of course not. Instead, he doubles down with circular reasoning. His conclusion is his premise. I'm right because I'm right.
It makes perfect sense, because that is when your journey as a human being, when the sperm and egg were separate, you were not yet a fused human being.
Finally, with science, philosophy, and ethics all failing him, Charlie falls back on his last resort. We're created uniquely in the image of God. After all that attempted logic, all those appeals to DNA and unique markers, we've arrived back exactly where we always knew we were going. Explicit religious doctrine. Something that cannot be falsified.
When the sperm and egg were separate, you were not yet a fused human being. You were not created uniquely.
DNA existed.
In image.
And to compound the problem, even within Christianity, image of God doesn't have a clear agreed upon meaning. Some early theologians thought that it meant humans literally representing God physically. Aquinas tied it to reason and intellect. Augustine said that it was about the mind's capability to know God. And modern theologians argue whether it's creativity, relationships, or moral agency. In fact, under many of these interpretations, the moment humans could be said to bear God's image aligns far more with Kai's criterion of consciousness than Charlie's fixation on conception. There's just no consensus and no support for Charlie's certainty. So Charlie's trying to smuggle a vague, internally contested theological idea into a debate about public policy. Not only does that fail science, it doesn't even work as theology, without a dozen caveats.
When the sperm and egg were separate, you were not yet a fused human being. You were not created uniquely.
DNA existed.
In the image.
Your DNA existed. I thought.
Well, no, the parts of your DNA existed. Your DNA did not exist. It's like saying that we have a full car just because we have all the parts. It was not yet put together until conception happens and the zygote was formed.
Oh, this car analogy, this beautiful, incredibly wrong car analogy. Why do teleological arguments always end up wearing engineering overalls? It's a shortcut, I guess, pretending that because machines need a designer, life must too. A tornado in a junkyard can't build an aeroplane, as they say. It always sounds dramatic, and it's always awful.
A tornado blowing through a junkyard and just happening to produce a perfect Boeing 747 airplane.
Now, Charlie thinks that he's making a profound point, but really, he's driving straight into a false analogy fallacy when someone assumes that because two things are alike in one respect, they must be alike in another. Imagine someone saying that running a country is just like running a business.
He ran the country like a business, like you should.
No, it's not. A government can't fire half its citizens for balancing the budget.
You're fired! Get out!
And it doesn't exist to generate profit. Or at least it shouldn't.
Wrong.
The analogy glosses over fundamental differences, and Charlie is doing the same thing with his car analogy. He compares sperm and eggs to inanimate car components, suggesting they only become life once assembled. But sperm and eggs aren't dead parts waiting for a mechanic. They are already living, metabolically active cells carrying DNA. And unlike cars, living cells reproduce themselves. The difference makes the analogy collapse immediately. A better analogy would be two streams joining from a river. The water already exists in both streams. It's moving, it's doing what water does. When they merge, they don't suddenly create new water out of nowhere, do they? There isn't a mystical moment when riverness magically appears. It's the same water, continuously flowing, just in a new configuration. That is far closer to what happens with biology. The sperm and egg are already living cells, metabolically active, they're carrying full genetic information. When they fuse, nothing is created from scratch. It's a continuation, a reorganization of what already was there. And unlike cars, rivers actually reproduce in a sense, through branching and merging streams. So the analogy at least respects the idea of continuity.
It was not yet put together until conception happens and the zygote was formed. Thank you. I think we have to get
Can we move on to the next question, please? Thank you.
Cornered and out of ammo, Charlie scrambles to declare victory and close the case, trying to sound authoritative by wrapping up things himself. But the moderator, not Charlie, is the one to formally end the exchange, reasserting her authority over the conversation, causing Charlie's attempted mic drop to become more of a mic fumble. His performative exit is undermined by the simple fact that he doesn't actually control when the debate ends.
Thank you. I think we have to
Can we move on to the next question, please? Thank you.
And so it concludes, with Kai's scientific argument standing as the last substantive contribution, while Charlie retreats behind divine imagery and a broken car analogy. The audience knows who won this exchange. The applause told us everything that we need to know.
Isn't there a separate DNA though than the mother? Like,
Yes, from the father.
okay, yes, but it's not.
Alright, so what we saw here was the difference between sounding confident and actually knowing what you're talking about. Charlie Kirk strutted in with slogans, certainty, and a pocket full of fallacies. But when pressed by someone who actually understood the science, the facade completely collapsed. DNA wasn't created, souls weren't definable, unique markers were meaningless, and conception became something magical.
Correct. Yes, something magical happens at that.
It's not magical, Charlie. We know about this.
Well, hold on.
Charlie.
Time out. Hold on.
Kai, by contrast, stayed patient and precise. He built from biology to philosophy, grounding moral worth in consciousness and suffering, principles both coherent and humane.
There's no space for any kind of moral framework to come into that until you consider that a human being is capable of consciousness and of suffering.
And it wasn't just the substance of his answers that mattered. His calm, collected, and even kind manner was the perfect kryptonite to Charlie's erratic bravado. Every time Charlie tried to bulldoze, Kai disarmed him with composure. Every time Charlie reached for mysticism, Kai pulled the discussion gently back to reason. In the end, this wasn't just a debate about abortion. It was a debate about how to reason, how to argue, and how we separate rhetoric from reality. On that score, the result couldn't be clearer.
Something magical happens.
And with that, we will wrap up. Thank you, as always, kindly for the view. Really, really appreciate you watching these videos, leaving the comments, encouraging us to make more content just like this. And talking of encouraging us to make the content, I want to once again thank Ground News. Ground News is the biggest sponsor of the channel. They sponsored us for a long time. We wouldn't be here without them. They are offering you 40% off their Vantage plan. So if you're ever going to buy the app, please buy it through our link. It indicates to them that our channel is worth advertising on, and it allows us to produce content just like this and to give you more and more content that hopefully just makes your life better, makes you better at arguing. You can get 40% off their Vantage plan by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.